Glenn?
Thank you, Daryl, and thanks to everyone for taking time out of your day to listen in on this webinar. I am Glenn Parker, as Daryl said, and I'm currently the chair of the IEEE USA Licensure and Registration Committee. And that committee is interested in all things that have to do with policy and licensure inside the United States. And I also serve as a member of the NCEES Electrical Examination Committee. If you're not familiar with NCEES, they are the national council who writes and administers all the different examinations for licensure of all the different disciplines within engineering, within all the different states and also within a lot of territories outside the U.S. So my email address is there on the front slide, and Daryl's going to make sure these slides get up on the website. So shoot me an email if you have any questions later on. This presentation is not specific to a given state. However, if you have state-specific questions, in the circles that we move in, we meet a lot of different people who are licensed in all different states, and so chances are we know someone who can answer your specific questions. So just shoot us an email if you have any questions. Also, this talk is not specific to electrical engineering. I realize this is an IEEE talk, so I will talk about some of the specifics for those exams, for the electrical exam, but the talk itself is for all different disciplines across engineering. And so today's talk, we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to talk about what it means to be licensed as a professional engineer. We're going to talk about the roles or the responsibilities and the rights of people who are licensed. We'll talk about requirements for licensure. We'll talk about what everyone's interested in, the fundamentals of engineering examination, also known as the FE exam, and also the principles and practices of engineering examination, also known as the PE exam. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And really what this concerns at the end of the day is your future. So I understand probably most of you or many of you are practicing engineers already, but perhaps some of you are still in school. And do you know what you'll do when you graduate, or where you'll be in 5 years or 10 years or 20 or 30? I was an undergrad myself back in the early 90s, and my career has not been at all what I assumed it would be at that point. So if you're like me, your career will definitely take a lot of turns that you may not be able to anticipate ahead of time. And so licensure is one of those things that you may want to consider even if you don't have a clue how you might use it later on. And really what the heart of licensure is trying to get to is competence, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The exams and the whole licensure process, really, they're not trying to figure out how smart you are, they're trying to figure out if you are minimally competent to practice engineering in the United States, and particularly within the state where you're licensed. So what do hiring firms look for? Well, they look for people who are competent. I think we would agree with that. They typically look for degrees and work references and technical skills. But one of the problems with that, and if you're a hiring manager, you may have noticed that just because two different people have the same degree, let's say a bachelor in electrical engineering, that doesn't mean that those two people are equally competent. And one of the problems that we find is that schools are very different in how they educate and in what they expect of their students. And so licensure is as close as we can get anyway to a universal standard that specifically measures things that are concerned with competence. And so what if there was a universal standard that's recognized throughout the profession? Well, that's what the PE license is supposed to be. So U.S. News and World Report said that engineering licensure is crucial for career advancement and top pay. Well, that's certainly true if you're in a field where you have to have a license to progress. Like, for example, many civil engineers couldn't get very high in a firm unless they had a license. It's not necessarily true for electrical engineers, but we do find that people who have licenses tend to advance more. What about other professions? Why do we license physicians? It's interesting that we even talk about whether an engineer should be licensed, because we would never talk about whether a medical doctor should be licensed or whether an attorney would be licensed. It turns out those are old professions that for a long time have been requiring licensure, and in the early days of engineering, it was that way as well. But over time, we've gotten into what's known as the industrial exemption, where in a lot of cases you don't have to be licensed. But it's interesting that engineering is sort of held out as being different from those other professional fields, whereas once you dig in, you find that we should be held to the same sorts of standards. Here's a short video that talks about just professionalism and the licensure process. Hey, Daryl, I got several comments that there was no audio. Did you hear anything on your end?
We could see, but there was no audio for some reason. Ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, we tested this out prior to and did not have an issue. So, anyway.
Do I need to keep my? So I'm dialed in on the phone. Do I need to keep this thing open? I assumed the video would pipe audio through WebEx, but maybe not.
Yeah, we'll try it that way.
Okay, I'll keep my phone off mute for the next one and just see how that goes. So these slides will be put up on the site. That video that we just watched was really talking about how if you have two resumes next to each other, one has a license and the other doesn't, the one with a license will naturally float to the top of the stack because that person has sort of gone the extra mile to show that they are competent. So that was the point of that video. Okay, so a professional engineer has proven that they have the education, the experience, and we'll talk about both of these in just a minute, and the technical knowledge to lead. And here's really probably the most important part. They have an obligation to safeguard the public. So it doesn't just say that you know what you're doing. It says that you are willing to take responsibility for what you do. And that's why it's required in certain cases. So you stand out in the crowd, but you're also really putting yourself out there as being responsible for any decisions that you might make. So if someone doesn't have to have a license and they choose to get one, then in a lot of ways it says something about that person's character that they are willing to be held responsible. So let's talk about who oversees licensure. Well, it turns out that it's not a national requirement. It's handled by the states. So that's why the requirements can change depending on what state you're in. Although it change very much, it just depends on, like for example, if you're in California, you would have to take a seismic exam if you wanted to be a structural engineer, but a structural engineer in other states might not have to. So those are the sorts of differences that you'll typically see. And in engineering, we call it comity licensure, which means that if you are already licensed in one state, then you can take a shortened process to get licensed in another state. Some other fields might call that reciprocity, but in engineering, we call that comity. So let's talk about how you get to there from here. The first thing you need is an ABET accredited degree. And my understanding is that some states will have a path to licensure for people who can't meet this requirement, but they'll typically add on some additional requirements. So you may want to check with your state board, or if you have a state-specific question, just shoot us an email. You have to have at least a bachelor's degree, and ABET accredits typically bachelor's programs. So if you don't have an engineering undergrad, but you do have an engineering master's, then your state may be able to work with you on getting licensed. The second part is experience. You have to work under the supervision of a licensed PE in the field where you're going to practice. And it says 4 years progressive, and that means, for example, you couldn't have 3 different PEs all certify the same year. It has to be 4 different years. And you have to have multiple professional engineers to write letters of reference for you. Okay, there's also a fundamentals of engineering exam that you have to pass. And typically people do that in their senior year of college. Or if you're like me, you didn't think that you would need licensure, so I didn't take the FE when I was an undergrad, and I was 13 years out of school when I decided to go back and take it. And I wished I had taken it when I was in school and still remembered a lot of that stuff. So if you have a chance to take it now and you're trying to decide whether or not to do it, I would say absolutely go ahead, because you'll never need to take it again once you pass. And it doesn't matter if it's 25 years from now that you decide to take the PE exam. If you've already taken the FE, you won't have to take it again. And then the next exam will be the Principles and Practices of Engineering, or the PE exam, in your specific discipline. Okay, so a lot of people say, what does a PE license get me? Well, in most states, you can't own a business with engineering in the title unless you have a PE on staff. So if you're wanting to be a consultant, if you want to have engineering in your business title, you can only do that if either you are a PE or you have one on staff. If you want to consult as an engineer, most states will require it. If you want to sign or seal a design saying that it's up to the standards of the engineering discipline, you'll need to be a PE. If you want to bid for any public money, if you want to advertise yourself as a professional engineer, or if you even want to go around calling yourself a professional engineer, the state boards will be very interested in why you're doing that if you don't have a PE license. So the license can open career doors. As I said, you float to the top if you have a license typically on your resume. And just as a side note, I'm a hiring manager for my office here, and we don't see very many PEs come through on resumes, but it definitely does stand out when we see one. I'm in one of those fields where you don't have to have a PE license, so it definitely does stick out. And you serve the public, which really takes it to another level as far as being a practicing engineer. And typically you can negotiate more money than peers that don't have a license. Okay, I'm going to try this video. Let me see if the video, let me know if the audio doesn't work quite well.
To be a professional engineer, it means that you are held to a higher standard than somebody who's not licensed.
I think professional means that you are, you're looking out for the public, you're looking out for the public's best interest, you're conscientious, you want to be as thorough as possible, and you want to do what's right.
One of the best ways to describe the process for getting your PE and why you need it is the same thing as a doctor and a lawyer. I mean, there's, I don't think engineers think of themselves in that same caliber a lot of times, and I don't know that we should. You know, we're building and designing the things that folks walk on and live in. And
to me, a professional engineer is, when I hear that name anyway, that means that they have at least taken their technical competency and they've demonstrated they're technically competent to somebody, and that they have experience in their industry. It's very important. It means they take responsibility for their actions. They are competent in what they're doing.
I think besides the technical aspect, there's a certain level of accountability. I think with every professional licensure, there is the technical aspect, and then there's a whole side of ethics that that licensure makes you have. I mean, you would have to go out and be ethical in your dealings, ethical in your procedure of work to be able to retain that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the fundamentals of engineering examination. So it's called Fundamentals of Engineering because it covers what you studied in undergrad. So if you're going to take a discipline-specific exam, like, say, electrical or mechanical, it'll obviously cover all the math and physics and thermodynamics and dynamics and all those sorts of things, but it'll also cover your specific discipline as well. And for the past 5 or 6 years, the FE exam has been computer-based. It used to be paper and pencil, but now you can go to any Pearson VUE Center around the world, and there are typically several of them in each state and even outside the U.S. I know they have some. And all you do is set it up. It's offered year-round. You can take it multiple times, and if you don't pass the first time, and you can just sign up and take it whenever is convenient for you. So there's a link there that you can go to later on to see exactly where all the test centers are. So there's 7 different exams. You pick the one that you want to take, and you don't have to take the one that's in the subject that you studied in school. You do need to take the one that's going to be in the subject that you practice in. And some people maybe have an issue with this. I had a friend who studied to be a textile engineer, but he decided he wanted to go into wastewater treatment, and so that he took a different exam. And as long as you pass that exam and practice within the discipline where you were licensed, there are no issues. So there's chemical, civil, electrical, and computer, environmental, industrial, and systems, mechanical, and some other smaller disciplines like nuclear and some of the other ones. If you wanted to be a software engineer, unfortunately, there's not a discipline-specific exam at this level, so you would need to take the electrical and computer would probably be the closest one because that's where the software questions would be. So the exam's made up of 110 multiple-choice questions, and you can go out to the NCEES website and see all the different specifications for the different types of questions. You can download what's called the Supplied Reference Handbook, and you will be given an electronic copy of that to use during the exam, but you can go ahead and download it ahead of time and practice with it. That's the restriction on this exam. You only get the one reference to use during the exam. You can't bring in your own references like you used to be able to do. And there are also some practice exams that you can get from the NCEES website. So here are the current specifications for the FE exam. The numbers indicate how many questions from that section would appear on a typical exam. And since it's offered year-round, it's assembled on the fly, which means that when you take it, you're not likely, if you take it twice, you're not likely to see the same exam twice. 2 people on the same day at the same test center wouldn't see the same exam. And that's why these numbers have ranges. So one good thing is to look at this. This is for the electrical and computer exam. There are specs for all the different exams out on the council website. And what I tell people to do is to look at this, figure out where the most important areas are, and study those probably the most, especially if you have a limited amount of time to prepare before you go take it. So there are different windows that are offered to go take the exam. January, February, you can take it at any point, and then there's a break. And the reason they do that is because they want to review, make sure there weren't any issues with the exam, and if there were any issues, they want to get them resolved. And so set it up with these breaks between, like, say, February and April, and then May and July. When you make the appointment, it's for a 6-hour span, so you need to have that much time available. And so this kind of walks through what you'll have to do. So there's a tutorial. If you go ahead and do all that ahead of time, then you don't have to sit through 8 minutes of tutorial. You can just dismiss it. And you do get a scheduled break that you don't have to take if you don't want it, but it's built in if you do want one. Okay, there's a link on the here, and you can also go out to the website for the council and see what the exam centers look like. I've put a picture down on the lower left. That's a more recent picture of what a Pearson VUE Center looks like. Of course, all the different centers are a little bit different, but that gives you an idea of what it might be like. And you can't bring any references. You can only bring an approved calculator. There's a list of which ones are allowed. And they will actually give you some paper for scratch work during the exam, and you have to turn that in before you leave. And there's an examinee guide that probably answers any questions, and probably a lot that you may have not thought about. There are practice exams out there, and you'll typically receive your results within a week or so. And that, for example, it varies a little bit, because if there was any issue on an exam, like say, just as an example, if 30 people answered the same wrong way for a question, then they would pull that question and have it reviewed by experts to make sure that it wasn't miskeyed, which means that the wrong answer was tagged in the system. And so that would cause a little bit of a delay for people who took that exam. So they build in a little bit of margin right there, but it's typically a week or so after the FE exam for you to get your results. And I already mentioned you should take the FE as soon as possible, but here's a short video that talks about it.
If I could go back and talk to myself, I would definitely recommend to take the fundamentals of engineering test while I'm still in school. All the information is fresh. You remember it, you know it, you're using it every day for all of your classes. Historically, if a candidate goes and pursues licensure earlier in their career, right after they get out of school, they do their FE exam, or even while they're in school, and 5 years down the line they do their professional engineering. If they pursue licensure earlier in their career, there's a much higher percentage of passing and people getting licensed. Even if you're going after a career path that doesn't require licensure, it's definitely a goal that you want to have, because if you decide 10 years down the line that you want to be licensed, it's that much harder, because now you got to relearn everything that you probably would have forgotten from in school. The key thing that if you talk to any professional engineer is, anybody will always say, hey, do it sooner rather than later, because the later you wait, the harder it's going to be, and you don't want to be having to go back year after year try and take the test, because it is difficult. Don't get me wrong, it's not something that it's easy, but that's what gives engineering and being a professional engineer, it's the distinction of being a professional engineer, that you do have to qualify for it, that you do have to pass a test that's set by your peers. So you're meeting a minimum standard that your peers have set for you, and that you're able to do that.
Okay, before we go on to the PE exam, Daryl, were there questions that have popped up already?
Yes, there were. Actually, I have a couple questions. Just tell me, well, the first question was, what exam do you take if you are a practicing antenna engineer?
You would take the electrical exam, and I'll talk about it in this section. There are 3 separate exams offered for electrical, and I'll talk about that in just a minute if I can defer that one.
Okay. The other question was, what if your degree is in an applied science, such as applied physics?
That would be up to the state board. They would likely review the particular degree that you had, and then look at your rationale for why that qualifies for engineering, and then they may put some other criteria on you, like it would really be up to the state board at that point. Okay.
There was one final question. It says, I am 60 with a BSEE PE, but I do have an EIT. Would a PE be worth my time and money? Is experience really worth more than 25 years without a PE? I'm assuming that's what he's saying.
Well, this is a talk to encourage licensure. So I guess my default answer should be absolutely it's worth it. But I would caveat that by saying, if you've gotten this far in your career and didn't need the license, then it's probably not necessarily, you're not going to get a big raise if you go get the license, but it would be something that it's like a PhD. Once you get it, no one can ever take it away. You have it. If it's something that you've always thought about doing, I would encourage you to do it because you've already passed the FE. Chances are you wouldn't have to study a lot for the PE for your discipline. So I'd encourage you to do it.
That was it.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about the PE exam. And so it's supposed to reflect real-world practice. So a lot of people think that PE exam stands for Professional Engineering Exam, but it actually stands for Principles and Practices of Engineering. And the idea being that the fundamentals exam is covering what you learned in school. The Principles and Practices exam should be what you would know if you had been practicing for 4 years out of school. So that's why there's that coupling between experience and before you take the PE exam. So it's testing for minimal competency. That would mean things like interpreting codes or safety and hazards and things like that. And I want to really underscore that many of the exams, in fact, all of the exams are going computer-based. The FE is all computer-based at this point. The PE exams have been paper and pencil up until a few years ago. They started transitioning some to computer-based. In 2021, all of the electrical exams are going to be computer-based. So if you want to take it on paper and pencil format, you need to get it in within the next couple of years. And so chemical, nuclear, petroleum, and environmental are currently computer-based, and the other ones are in the process of being converted over. So the exams are developed by licensed engineers like me, and if you are on the call and you're a licensed engineer, I'd encourage you to get involved. In fact, just shoot me an email and tell me you're licensed and you want to get involved, and I can put you in touch with the right people. It's a great experience, and once you get your license, it's a great thing to be involved with because it keeps you current on a lot of the things that you may not get to practice in your day-to-day job. The ones that are still paper and pencil, you can bring in whatever references you want. It needs to be bound materials, and you can actually go out to the website, the NCEES website, and see all the specifics. But you get to bring in a dolly loaded with hardcover books if you want to do that, and a lot of people do. And the computer-based test has a supplied reference that's actually built onto the computer, so you can't bring any references in for that. So I work on the computer exam committee, and we're currently working on our supplied reference. That's going to be an online reference book. So yeah, the computer-based tests for the PE exam are going to be very similar to the FE as far as the format goes. Okay, so to answer the question about the antenna engineer, the electrical exam is actually three separate exams. You pick which one you want to take. It's currently on paper, and it'll be that way until I think either April or October of 2021. It's going to be the first computer-based exam, and then it'll be computer-based from then on. So at the moment, it's an 8-hour paper exam, and you can pick computer engineering, which is flip-flops and all the software questions and all the things that computer engineers would know. There's the electrical and electronics exam, which is actually that one is also called ECC for electrical controls and electronics controls and communications. That's where the antenna engineer would want to go. So that's where you're going to see things like antenna patterns and electromagnetics. All those sorts of things would be on that exam. And then there's the power exam, and that's strictly power questions. So it's talking about three-phase power, the different phaser notation things that power engineers would get into. So those are the three choices that you have as an electrical or computer engineer to take those. And all the specifications are online. All right, well, it's tough for a reason. And the reason is they're trying to make sure that someone who is dangerous doesn't get to go out and build bridges and build things that can hurt people. So they kind of give you that caveat that it's tough. And I get, when I ask people if they felt like the FE or the PE exam was more tough, was more difficult, I really get different answers. Some people felt like the FE was more difficult. Some people say the PE. And it may depend on where you are in your career. It really gives you a sense of accomplishment. Let me play this short video.
It was one of those moments in your life you'll probably never forget when you find out that you passed, and it was just a wonderful feeling.
First thing I did when I got off the phone was I opened up my resume, and on the top of my resume where my name was, I added a comma after my last name, a big capital P, a period, a capital E, and a period.
I knew there would be career opportunities beyond just a job out of school, but to be able to advance and learn and grow within that field. Which is again why licensure appealed to me, because I wanted to know and to show that I was committed to that career, that I was willing to make the effort to continue to learn and advance within that field, and then be able to make even greater contributions in the future.
There's an immediate, oh wow, this guy knows what he's doing.
It's instant credibility.
And at the end of the day, that means, hey, I'm the one with the job security. Get your license, it'll absolutely be worth it. You won't regret it.
Okay, it is a sense of accomplishment, and I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about some of the state requirements that I didn't touch on earlier. The requirements do change by state, and a few years ago, there was something called decoupling that was suggested by the council. And decoupling is the idea that some people want to take the PE exam as soon as they've taken the FE. And so the council wanted to make that possible if the states would allow it, and so they left it up to the states. And some states have gone that route. I believe Texas allows decoupling, and what that means is you don't have to wait 4 years after the FE to take the PE. You could go ahead and sign up for it, take it right away, but then you still have to get that experience before you can be licensed. And so you would take the exams back to back and then go get your 4 years experience. And Alabama, I'm licensed in Alabama, they do not allow that, so Alabama doesn't have decoupling. So you would need to check with your state to see if they allow that. Daryl, was there another question that popped up?
Yes, there was. A person just asked, does a certain number of years of experience exempt you from the FE such that you can go straight to taking the PE?
That, in general, no, but that is state specific as well. I should mention there are some states like Wyoming where if you have a PhD, you don't have to take the exams at all. You can get licensed since you have a PhD. Now, that seems a little strange because that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right experience, but you don't have to take the exams in Wyoming if you have a PhD. And there are some other states like that as well. As far as waiving the FE, I don't know of any states that just let you go straight to the PE without passing the fundamentals exam.
He just responded saying, I thought that was the case in Georgia, which I know you're in.
I'm not really up to date on the specific state board requirements for Georgia. I could find out for you, though. If you could shoot me that in an email, I'd be happy to find out and reply.
All right, cool. And there was one other question. This person asked, he says, what are the requirements for engineers that studied abroad?
The state would probably want to verify the degree and verify that it's up to the same standard as an ABET degree. In fact, ABET does accredit some institutions abroad, so just because you're abroad doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have an ABET degree. So you would need to go down that road and make sure that it does, and the state board would work with you on that.
Cool. Yeah. Those are the questions for right now.
Okay, great. Well, that is all I had to mention. If there are other questions, I'm happy to answer any. If you want me to talk more about some of the areas, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, everyone, as he said, please type your questions in the chat pod while we're waiting to see if anybody has any additional questions. I just want to thank you, Glenn, for coming on and doing this webinar for us. It's been very educational, at least for me, and so we appreciate your presentation. We just got another question. It says, what percentage of women engineers are licensed? Would you happen to know that?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't even know where you would find that statistic. I can say that on the electrical committee, we have probably of the 50 or so active people on that committee, we have probably 10% female. So I don't think it's a large number.
IEEE USA, we actually conduct our salary survey, and I do know we do ask the question whether people are licensed or not. And I could go back and look to see if we break down that category based on women and men. If you want to shoot me an email, or I know who you are, I can follow up once we hang up from this, or once the webinar is over with. She said, "Okay, thanks." Here, another question. How to prepare for the PE? I know there are study materials and information for the FE. Is there such thing for the PE?
I think the best thing for the PE is to pick the exam that you're going to take. So if you're electrical, for example, pick which exam you're going to take, if it's computer or if it's the electronics, controls, and communications or the power exam, and then go out to the NCEES website. You can purchase a sample exam that's written by the same people who write the real exam, and that'll tell you exactly what sort of material is going to be on there. And so you'll also want to download the specification to look at the different areas, and you can figure out which ones you need to dig into better according to that. So I will say that the power exam is very standards focused. So if you're going to be doing the power exam, you definitely want to be up on the NEC and the fire protection codes. The electronics, controls, and communications is much more theoretical. So it's very much like FE type problems, except it's going to be more lengthy. And the computer exam is it's a lot like the FE type questions too. So if you get the FE review manual and look through there at all the different circuits, and also purchase the practice exam for either one of those, that's going to give you a very good idea of what's going to be on the real exam.
Cool. Well, great. Excellent. Are there any more questions? If there are, please type them in the chat pod. As I was saying, Glenn, we thank you so much for doing this webinar for us. I should add that we are recording this webinar, and it will be up on the IEEE USA webinar page probably by Monday. I will get the slides from Glenn, and we will place that as well, so you would get the recording and the slides in the same location. And so if anyone wants to watch this again or look at the slides again, you'll be able to do so probably most likely on Monday. Oops, sorry about that. We had one more question just come in. I heard a rumor that if you have a PhD, the FE is not needed. Is that true?
You mean to get licensed?
I guess to get licensed to get your PE. Yes. Yes.
That's certainly not true in every state. It's not true in my state. And but if you're in Wyoming, and I believe Texas also has this exemption. If you have a PhD, you don't have to take either exam. You just go through the process of filling out all the paperwork for the board, prove that you have a PhD. I believe you have to have some of your experience would have to be certified by a licensed PE, but you don't have to take the exams at all in those states. However, if you go that route, then when you go to transfer your license to a different state, they may not allow you to do that without taking the exams. So some states are more strict on transferring licenses in that case.
Okay. He said thank you. Another question just came in. I was told by a PE PE you get, I'm sorry, let me read this again. He said, I was told by PE you get a test with 10 questions, but you choose to answer 8 or 6, and those are the ones they grade. With PE changing to computer-based, is this going to be the case? What's the format of the PE?
So what what that person told you was true 20 years ago, but since I forget, maybe around 2000, they went to all multiple choice. So it used to be just like a final exam in college. You would sit down, they would give you a question, and you would work it out, and then someone would sit down and grade it. But they've gone multiple choice since 1999 or 2000. So there are 40 multiple choice in the morning. So this is on the PE exam. 40 multiple choice in the morning, 40 in the afternoon. So 80 total. And when it goes to computer-based testing, it'll be a similar format, but it won't be strictly multiple choice. They'll have other types of items on there. Like, for example, they call them alternative item types. And an alternative item type is something like drag and drop. So maybe you have a bucket of circuit parts, and you have to drag them out and build a circuit. So that would be a different type of question that could be on an electronic exam that you couldn't really do on paper and pencil.
Cool. One other question. He says, she had a follow-up real quick. He says, can you take the PE abroad?
Yes, I know that they offer it in places like Guam, and but it just depends. You would need to get on the NCEES website, and I believe they will list all the different Pearson VUE centers, even the ones that are abroad. I know of some people that took it in China. So what I've been interested to learn is that certain countries outside the U.S. will use the U.S. exams as part of their license process, and so you'll find that the exam is offered in other places, and so you can take it if you're on travel or something to that location.
Cool. Another question came in. It says, once you get the PE, don't you have to take certain professional education courses to stay up to date?
Yes, you do, absolutely, and that varies by state also. In my state, we have to do 15, they're called PDHs, Professional Development Hours. We have to do 15 per year, and I'll put in another plug for the council. I work on the electrical committee. If you get licensed as an electrical engineer and you start working on the committee, then you get, just by traveling to the exam meetings, you get enough hours, professional contact hours, that you can renew your license just by going to those meetings each year.
Yeah, cool, great. And I should also say that I believe we give out the PDHs for attending our IEEE USA webinars, and you would go to our webinar page to get the details on how to do that as well. So if there aren't any more questions, I will say, Glenn, thank you so much for doing this webinar for us. We really appreciate it very much. Thank everyone for attending, and that's about it. And I'll give you any last words if you have anything to say, Glenn.
Great, thank you, Daryl, for setting this up. It was Daryl's idea. It's my pleasure to do this. And really, anyone that has a question about the licensure process, or if you want me to put you in contact with someone who can answer questions about your specific state, I'll be happy to do that. Just shoot me an email. And if you have any question at all about anything to do with the licensure, I'm happy to help in any way.
All right, well, thank you so much. And like I said, we're recording this webinar. We will put it up on the IEEE USA webinar page by Monday. And if anybody has any questions about the IEEE webinars themselves, you feel free to drop me an email. You have my email address, and that's about it. So, Glenn, thanks so much, and I will go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you again. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.